This video is dedicated to Sarah, who tragically died on 8th of March 2020. She was a huge horror fan. I'm Bleeding Critic. Welcome to Scary Stories UK. It's time for some brand new scary stories from Reddit Nosleep. I just came across 3 very different stories that resonated with me online. Outside, contorted witches and giant spider demons are desperately wanting to watch this video with ya. So you better make sure all the lights are switched off. Turn your phone off, and most importantly lock the front door, and then check that all windows are closed. Now it's time to let your imagination do the work. There's a restless, nasty ghost in the room with ya. Try not to scream when you see it. Just a scratch. It all started the spring I scraped my knee. Mum frowned and told me to be more careful. Dad sat on the floor and took my face in his hands, wiping my tears away with his huge thumbs, telling me that it was going to be okay, it was just a scratch. I wasn't supposed to be out that day. Mum was really upset about that. I promised I would never do it again as Dad wrapped my knee with that long band-aid thing and told me never to take it off. That was the year Mum called Sarah and told her to come home from college, but Sarah never showed up. Mum slept all day and Dad looked tired all the time but smiled for me. The band-aid kept itching, but I didn't take it off once because I promised. It got yellow and all gross, but I didn't take it off. Dad would hold my hand so tight it hurt when we left the house. Mum never left. My leg hurt when we walked though, and I could barely breathe through the heavy mask he had me wear, so he had to stop taking me with him. We moved my bedroom downstairs and Dad called it a big boy update. He said that since I was getting older I would need a bigger room. He made a big show of it, put up all my posters for me, moved my dresser and my bed, and he would say, "See? There's more space for your toy boxes," he said, "and more room for your dresser," but I knew that he did it because I couldn't get up and down the stairs anymore. Around the edges of the giant band-aid, my leg was turning blue and grey, but I never took it off. We lost contact with Nan that year, and every time I asked about her, Dad would get this sad look in his eyes that I just didn't get it. He would say that the phone lines were dead, so they couldn't reach her. I didn't know what that meant very well. Summer hit and Sarah didn't come home. "Where is she?" I asked. "School's out and she promised she would play with me when she got home." Dad frowned. "She's sick, Batty. She can't come home right now." "Did she scrape her knee as well?" Dad closed his eyes, took a deep breath, shook his head. "No, bud, she cut her cheek." That was the year I looked out of the window and saw Mrs. Johnson limp down the road. She had a cat scratch on her hand and her whole arm up to her head was blue and grey, and she looked really hurt. Dad boarded up the windows. Mum didn't really ever come down to eat, but I would see Dad bring up plates for her. I really missed her that year. The blue and grey started forming up my leg and I soon couldn't move anymore. I'd never seen Dad cry like that before. I felt so bad. I wish I didn't hurt him like that, even though I didn't know what I did. He came home one day with an axe and a bunch more of the long band-aids, way cleaner than the one still wrapped around my knee. He looked at me and he cried and he told me he was sorry and that this was gonna hurt a lot. But he loved me so much and would do anything for me. That was the year I lost my leg and I started feeling much better. Dad brought home a wheelchair and he let me sit in the backyard, again under his supervision. I never saw anyone outside our fence and I kept wondering where everyone went. Jack wasn't out splashing in his pool in the hot summer or climbing all over the jungle gym with his little sister. Avery didn't run through the grass with her big black dog anymore, and I wondered how long they had been gone or if I missed the goodbye party. Sometimes Mum would come down and sit on the porch with me. Dad said it was good for her to move around every once in a while, but she never said anything, just sat there. One day she fell down the stairs and cracked her head open. I screamed, Dad screamed, and there was blood running down her face everywhere, and I was so scared that I was sobbing. Again, Mum didn't say anything, but I think she was scared too. Dad covered it right away and he didn't let Mum outside again. Her face got all blue and grey like my leg. That was the year I last saw Mum. I didn't ask Dad what happened, I think I knew, but last time I saw her she looked so dead. I don't know if she recognised me. Dad and I felt like the only two people in the universe. The TV just turned on to static now. The radio was the same, the internet didn't connect. We were all alone. I missed going to school and going on walks and recess. I missed Mario Kart and running through the forest and made up murder mysteries. I missed Mum and Sarah. That was the year I asked, "What happened to them, Dad?" And he didn't seem like my dad anymore, though he tried to be. I know he put on a face and smiled and tried to be my dad, but I don't know if it comforted him or if it was to comfort me. That was the year I turned 8 and Dad didn't bake me a cake, so he got me a can of peaches instead. It was winter by then and the house got really cold, so Dad gave me all the blankets, but I made him sleep in my bed so he could share. He still got sickly though, and he got more tired every day. He walked through the house like a zombie, but he was still pretending to be my dad. He still gave me the bigger plate of beans and he covered me with all the blankets when I shivered. And then one day Dad came home from the store and he had a cut on his hand from where he slipped on the ice. He looked so tired and so pale, he looked like a ghost, like a person that was no longer there. The cut got blue and grey around the long band-aid. That was the year that Dad looked up at me with tears in his eyes. That was the year he told me, "I'm so sorry, Daniel. I tried so hard and I love you so much and I really hope you know that I will always love you." That was the year that I was 8 and I was so lonely. And all I had was my dad. That was the year my dad gave up on himself, but I didn't give up on him. I would never give up on him. "I can do it, Dad. I can do it. Please let me do it. I can." I had cried. I was 8. I was young. I cried when I scraped my knee and I would do anything for my dad. That was the year Dad lost his hand. And I cried for so long. I cried until Dad sat on the floor and took my face in his hand, wiping my tears away with his huge thumb, telling me that it was going to be okay, it was just a scratch. It all started the spring I scraped my knee. That was the year Mum died and Sarah never came home. That was the year Mrs. Johnson roamed the streets and Jack wasn't out splashing in the pool. And Avery didn't run through the grass with her big black dog anymore. That was the year that everyone disappeared. Everyone except my dad, who never left. Room 888, telephone. I won't bore you with the whole story, but I suppose a few details could help. On the 8th of August 2006 I checked into the hotel. I don't remember much, honestly, but I do remember being somewhat of a supernatural aficionado. I'd stayed in several straight up haunted hotels before without much of anything happening, so I figured out everything would be fine with this one. I mean, I couldn't exactly get a solid story down on what people thought was going on with this place, but everyone from the children to the elderly say it's been there as long as they could remember, but I couldn't find any details about it online. An old writer shook his head at me and said that it was a shame it wasn't in New England, or else he'd write about it, but who knows? Maybe it was in New England. I don't exactly remember where it was when I entered the hotel, just that it was sweltering, and all I wanted to do was draw myself a cold bath and then head to bed with all the windows open. The room itself seemed to be furnished in a style reminiscent of the 60s, with a rotary phone and everything, and I think I smiled at that. I can't really remember smiling a lot after I checked in. Then the phone rang. I think it was instincts that made me pick it up and hold it to my ear, but maybe it was something more. I may have thought more of it at the time, but honestly my thoughts are hazy, and talking about it is sort of draining me. I do know that I dropped it when I heard the voice coming from the other end, and I haven't heard my mother in nearly 5 years, and yet there was her voice. She was asking me if I'd eaten that day, if I had enough water. Most people are dehydrated all the time, but they don't even realise it. It's dangerous, I tell you. I read about it, she said. It was just like I'd remembered her, honestly, and I think I was too surprised to say much, which she scolded me about. Even when I apologised and interacted with her, I could still hear her. So it wasn't some temporary hallucination dredged up from the depths of my mind due to oppressive loneliness. I don't remember what exactly we discussed, but I do remember how drained I felt when the call finally ended. Just how much I just wanted to be on that call again. After heading to the bathroom and taking a shower, the phone rang again, and it would continue to do so. A seemingly endless cycle, on and on and on. I heard everyone I knew and loved who had passed away. I could have sworn that I had even heard the sound of my childhood dog Buster barking on the other end. Though each of these calls, why I could interact with them, I couldn't tell them what I wanted to, what I needed to. I couldn't tell Mum to get that lump checked out, or Grandpa to quit smoking, or Grandma to take her pills, and sometimes I didn't even tell them that I loved them. Those times were the ones that hurt the most. I hardly ate, barely slept, and certainly didn't shower, devoting all of my time to the next call. I couldn't miss the next call, I just couldn't. They told me amazing things too, about how much they loved me, about how special I was, and sometimes it was horrible listening to them. They'd blame me for everything and voice some of my worst faults, but it was addicting somehow. I needed to talk to them one last time. I kept telling myself over and over and over, they loved me. They were the only ones who loved me. I needed them. I couldn't survive without them. Talking to them was my purpose. Oh, please don't let me go. Please keep loving and acknowledging me. I need your love. I couldn't tell you how long that was my life, even if I wanted to. The whole time I hadn't had any distractions, no disturbances, though I could hear certain things from outside of my room. All I know is that one day someone else came into the room. I tried to talk to the woman, but she didn't acknowledge me, and when the next call came, she was the one who answered it. It was then that I noticed that I didn't notice what the date was. After a while, the woman was the one who was answering the calls, the one who didn't eat or sleep, much less bathe. I left the room then, trying to rationalise things, but whoever I talked to just seemed to blow me off and walk past me like I wasn't there. Look, I'm not stupid. I know all the tropes about these kinds of things, and my heart was sinking, but can any of you look at me in the eyes and tell me that you'd come to terms with the fact that you were dead immediately? Sure. I like the paranormal, but I was still just a person, and one of the biggest ways to cope with something is by ignoring it and pushing it away. Oh yeah, and drinking. See? It seems like I can be seen and acknowledged in the bar, of course. I tried to tell people about what happened at first, but eventually realised it wasn't of any use to me. They'd either not believe me, get scared, or promise that they'd help, and end up disappearing on me. I don't talk to people much anymore, which is why it's been a huge relief doing this. You might be wondering how I found your address, but things like that don't really matter when you're dead. All I know about you is that you've booked room 888, and I want to tell you what happened to me, even if I'm just screaming into the void. So, will you answer the telephone? Text you later. If you're listening to this right now, I'm going to ask you to do something very important. You may not want to do it, but you will feel so much better when it's done. You will feel a relief that you did not know you needed. A weight that you did not know you were carrying will fall off your shoulders. I promise, don't allow yourself to end up in a situation like the one I am in now. I've never been so terrified, so miserable ever before. My hands are shaking as I'm talking right now. My eyes are blurry from the tears, so please, I'm begging ya. Go into your contacts on your cell phone, call every single person you love, and if they don't answer, tell them to call you back as soon as they can. Don't skip a single one, and make it clear that you need to hear their voice. Don't text them and assume they're fine. Statistically, yes, they are probably going on with their lives, and they'll only find your out-of-the-blue call to be an amusing but unnecessary wellness check. For your sake, I hope that's all that happens. It's weird, you know, how much we all rely on our phones to tell us that our loved ones are okay, how satisfied we feel when we get a text message or a response to our comment on Instagram. The thought that it could be anyone else on the other end of the phone typing away never goes through our heads, does it? And it certainly never went through mine, the millennial that I am. The boomers joke we were born with phones in our hands and we turn up our noses at their criticism, but you know what, they do have a point. Our brains are different, they're wired differently. The way we maintain our relationships, it's different, but not better. We text our mothers a goddamned heart emoji and tell ourselves, yeah, that's enough. I'm sure she knows I love her. We get a difficult text from a significant other and have the privilege to just sit on it and ask our friends to play psychologist so they can tell us what to say. We text friends we haven't seen in months and assume when they text back everything the text reads is true. As I found out earlier today, that isn't always the case. My best friend and I have known each other since we were 5. We went to elementary, middle and eventually high school together, and even as our own social circles ebbed and flowed, we always stayed close. I'm talking first name basis with each other's parents, sleepovers, being first on the call list when something bad happened. She got her driver's licence 3 months before I did, and she drove me everywhere, to soccer practice, to the diner for disco fries at 2 AM, home after I got drunk with a girl I should not have let my guard down around. My parents still don't know about that night, and I don't know if I'll ever tell them, but long story short, Madison was practically my sister, my best friend, and when she went away to college, moving halfway across the country to pursue the sorority lifestyle I'd always gently mocked her for wanting, I assumed that wouldn't change. I hoped it wouldn't, and it didn't, not until sophomore year. I still knew her like the back of my hand for the first year of our separation. We called each other every weekend. We were just friends. There was nothing between us. We video called frequently enough that the people living on my dorm floor got used to the sound of her voice and noticed when she dyed her hair. We kept each other updated on grades. I talked to her about the girls. She talked to her about boys and homesickness. Nothing felt all that different, and I missed the way she smiled, but that was about it. Yeah, I know it sounds creepy, but look, you all exactly know what I mean, but the people that you love always, don't they smell a certain way, and it's sort of comforting. It's not something you notice until you've been reunited after a long separation. It's like coming home, isn't it? Unfortunately, time's arrow marches forward and the calls become less frequent. If she notices this subtle change, she never voiced it to me, but by summertime I always felt weird about calling her up to make lunch plans. Time does this to us. If too much of it passes by, it becomes harder and harder to rekindle the friendship flame. We doubt ourselves, we stay in stasis. We tell ourselves that this is just how things are now, and besides, don't we have new friends that need our attention more? Why dictate the precious hours we have left after classes and schoolwork to someone that hasn't called us in 3 weeks, when your neighbour just knocked on your door with a bottle of wine and a smile on their face? By junior year, my best friend and I communicated solely through text, and don't get me wrong, when we got to texting, we went the whole hog. GIFs, strings of nonsensical emojis, novel after novel of blue bubble confessions and life updates. We'd text for so long our thumbs would cramp up, and then we'd text each other about our thumb cramps, and everything felt sort of normal for a little bit, but then the last text of the conversation would be sent and my thumbs would linger over the keyboard. Wasn't there more to say? Could I keep the conversation going longer? Was I being needy? Was I annoying her? And every time I'd put the phone down and find something else to do, the cycle would repeat, not frequently enough for our conversations to feel meaningful, until 6 months ago. Keep in mind that I am now a senior, and at that point she and I hadn't spoken for over a year. Sure, I'd seen her face on Instagram and I'd automatically double tap on the picture no matter the subject matter, but we had not spoken in 13 months. I hadn't seen her over summer break either because she'd been studying abroad. I'd been annoyed that she hadn't made the effort to see me at all. The study abroad program had only been for a month, and she could have given me at least an hour for coffee and a hug, so when I got a text from her out of the blue, I was both surprised and, annoyed. She said, "Hey, I miss you." I said, "Yeah, you didn't miss me over the summer." I admit I was being harsh, but I probably surprised her with my attitude, and she didn't seem to understand why I was upset with her. She continued texting. She said, "Damn, someone's feeling feisty today." And I said, "Girl, you blew me off all summer." And she said, "What do you mean? You knew I was busy." And I said, "Yeah, and you came back halfway through July. I didn't go back to school until August, and I know for a fact that you left even later than I did." And she texted saying, "What do you mean? You know that for a fact? ? And I said, "Well, you posted it on Instagram." After that, she didn't answer me for a few hours, and I sort of felt justified in my anger, but then she texted me back and apologised, and for the first time in forever, we stayed up late updating each other on what had been going on in our lives. And when she told me about the guy she'd been dating and how they met on her study abroad trip and hit it off, I was ready to let her off the hook, but then she dug a little deeper and told me about how she seemed to change the longer they dated, and he became He became controlling, this guy, and his mood swings turned into full-on rages. And yeah, as a friend, I was concerned for her, even before she told me about the first time he hit her, and at that point I was ready to fly to her school and kick his ass. Years of childhood memories and daddy bear instinct rising up in me. She LOL'd it off and told me that she finally managed to break up with him, and she had in fact done it not just half an hour before she texted me. She'd been sitting in her room crying and needed comfort, so she naturally reached out to me. She had added the naturally part on her own. I immediately felt like a shithead for being mad at her, but I assured her it was fine, that we were all good, and to my surprise we ended up texting on a nearly day-to-day basis, and it seemed like now the dark cloud of her ex-boyfriend's presence had been banished. She was free to be my best friend again. She started reminiscing about all the good times we had growing up and how much she missed our hometown, and it felt good to have her back. I didn't think anything was off about any of it until the anniversary of my own assault. Remember that girl I mentioned earlier, the one I shouldn't have gotten drunk around? Yeah, that was the worst night of my life, and you know what, I'm still in therapy about it. Anyway, my best friend had a bit of a tradition when it came to the anniversary. She always texted me in the morning to see how I was doing, and for years after the assault, I would have horrible nightmares of that night. And while we were still in high school, I would always call her to calm me down, which was difficult for a bloke to do, even as a young kid. But as time went on, the nightmares went away. But she still checked in with me to make sure I was okay. Even last year, when we didn't actually speak, I'd woken up to a long, heartfelt text that assured me I could always call her if I needed her on that day. This year, no text, nothing. At first I didn't want to worry, I didn't want to come off as damaged and desperate by reaching out first. If she texted me, she'd text me, I told myself, but when she texted me around noon complaining about her cafe lunch, I just couldn't help it. She said, "The food at this hall sucks, I don't know why I still come here. What do they serve at your school? Anything good?" And I said to her, "Nah, LOL. And then I said, I missed your text this morning, kind of threw me off my routine, And she went, "What text?" And I said, "Did you forget what today is?" And she went, "It's Tuesday." I remember frowning down at the phone. Was she playing dumb? I said, "Remember what happened in high school? I called you drunk, begging you to come and pick me up." There was a brief delay before she responded, and the reply I received made my blood run cold. "Oh yeah, you were so wasted," she said. What the hell, I remember thinking at the time. Her response made no sense to me. That night was not the kind of night you just forget. And she had never been so cold about what had happened, so blasé. Was she blaming me? Was she suggesting that what had happened to me was my fault? I had no idea. I didn't have it in me to respond, and she noticed my sudden detachment. She then started texting me, asking what was wrong. She said, why are you so offended? Listen, man, get over it. We're in high school. Why? Then she said, "Why aren't you responding?" And then she said, "Look, I'm sorry if I offended you. Didn't know you were still so hung up about it." Can you imagine thinking that your best friend is judging you for still being hung up about being assaulted? I was floored. I was furious. I wanted to call her, scream at her over the phone and demand that she apologise. I don't know why I didn't. Instead, I did what I imagine most millennials do. I ghosted her. I shut her out. I didn't respond to a single one of her texts after that. And believe me, when I say there was a lot of apologising, a lot of desperate requests for communication, a lot of "how many times do I have to say I'm sorry" texts, all of which I ignored. But you know what? There never was a phone call or a voicemail. Christmas break came up and I was packing. I always went home for Christmas, staying with my parents so I could be pampered by family for upwards for 2 weeks. She texted me again, trying a different tactic this time. Instead of starting out with an apology, she asked me if I was going to be in town for Christmas. She texted, she said, If you won't accept my apology over the phone, will you let me apologise in person? She was asking to meet up. This would have been the first time I'd seen her in person since the summer between our sophomore and junior years. At first I wanted to say no. But if she wanted to apologise in person, wasn't that a sign that she was seriously sorry? If she didn't really care, wouldn't she have been content to just let our friendship fester and die like so many do? Despite my misgivings, I agreed to meet up, but things got weird again as soon as I tried to make actual plans. She didn't seem to want to stick to anything solid, and if I suggested one of our old haunts from back in the day, she shot me down. The diner was out, Starbucks was lame, even coming over to my house to hang out in the basement was out. And you know what, we spent a good part of our childhoods in my basement. It was finished with a full bar and an entertainment system. I actually used it as my bedroom on Christmas visits because my parents had turned my bedroom into a storage unit. She wanted to meet up at a park, and for some weird reason we'd never hung out at the park before, ever, and it was so out of character for her. So when I called her out on this, she had this to say. I texted, "Why in the hell would we hang out at the park in the middle of winter?" And she said, "What, you've never boozed it up in the park before? My friends and I do it all the time." And I said, "It doesn't sound fun, it sounds cold and stupid." And she said, "Come on, I'll bring something warm and we'll shoot the shit on the swings or something." And I said, "Why can't we just get lunch at the diner?" I never really agreed to meet up with her, but eventually she wore me down to a soft maybe, and at that point I was travelling home and too excited to see my parents to worry about it. I got home on Friday and took yesterday to just catch up on sleep and finish my Christmas shopping. Today is Sunday, tonight is the night I was supposed to meet up with her, but I won't be doing that. Instead, I'll be at the police station giving testimony. My best friend's parents will be with me, my mother sobbing into tissue after tissue while her father shakes with rage. 3 hours ago I decided to go straight to my friend's house to see her. You see, I'd done it a million times, and after all I knew I was always welcome there. Her parents had always loved me, they treated me like their own son. I stopped by the local donut shop for a basic dozen as a peace offering, in case my showing up would be an unwelcome surprise, and 3 hours ago her mother answered the door when I knocked. She looked awful. I'm not saying that to be mean, but she really looked awful, like she'd aged about 20 years since I'd seen her last. She didn't seem to recognise me at first, which was strange, but then she said my name, and under her breath, and she just softened and she let me in and thanked me for the donuts. And immediately she went off to make me a cup of coffee. I took a moment to let the familiarity of the house wash over me, and when my best friend's mum came back into the living room with my coffee, I asked her where her daughter was, and she just gave me this look. It was a look that I don't think I'll ever forget for the rest of my life. She went, "Excuse me?" she asked. Let me guess, she's still asleep. Once a bum, always a bum, right? And then to my surprise, she started to cry. I was immediately on my feet, rushing to comfort her despite not knowing the reason for her tears, and she kept muttering something under her breath, repeating herself over and over again. "You don't know, you don't know, you don't know, you don't know, do you? You don't know." I tried to make it better, but the crying just kept getting worse, and eventually I was able to herd her towards the couch, and at that point I was relieved when my best friend's dad appeared from upstairs, and as he descended the staircase demanding to know what was wrong, I couldn't help but notice how grey he'd gotten, and when he saw me his eyes widened and he seemed to freeze. She just started crying. I don't know what I said that could have upset her. He nodded, acknowledging that he'd heard me, before gently pushing me out of the way. He knelt by his wife's side, gently shushing her as her tears fell faster and her cries turned into sobs. And I looked on, I just felt hopeless, and then I realised that I could just find my friend on my own without him. I still knew where her room was, and maybe she would just be able to help her mum calm down, and I just excused myself. But I don't think either one of them heard me, and I just took off down the hallway in the direction of my friend's room, and I saw the door shut tight with no light seeping up from the underneath, and reached out to grasp the knob. A hand reached out from behind me to slam the door shut just as I started to pull it open, and I jumped, shocked by the sudden closeness of the body hovering over me. It was her dad again. He had tears in his eyes as well. He laid his hand on my shoulder and asked me very quietly to rejoin them in the living room. "We don't go in there anymore," he said as he nodded towards the still shut room. "Why?" He didn't answer me. Instead he just guided me back down the hallway, and my best friend's mum got on a hold of herself at that point, but she was shaking, and I could tell when she grabbed both my hands in hers. The dad remained standing there, his arms were folded. "Oh dear," my best friend's mum said, I'm so sorry for scaring you. You caught me off guard, and I remember that we'd never called you to tell you what happened." My stomach sank. I felt a burning sensation. A bad feeling crept its way up my spine. "What do you mean?" That's when I found out that my best friend had been murdered. 6 months ago, a body had been found in her apartment. The same day she texted me to tell me that she missed me. But she hadn't been the one texting me, no. By the time I'd gotten that text and the "Hey, I miss you" text, she had been dead for 40 minutes. I think I blacked out once I realised what that meant. I don't remember leaving their house. I don't remember driving home. The next thing I knew, I was at home staring down at my phone. I was rereading the text messages, looking for signs, and my first innocent thought was, supernatural? Could this have been a ghost? No. It was worse than that, much worse. I should have known something was wrong when my best friend didn't remember that anniversary of when I got assaulted. I should have known when something was wrong when my best friend didn't want to meet me somewhere where we could be seen. I texted my best friend for the last time an hour ago, and I got a response 10 minutes later. And now I'm begging you, all of you, to call your friends, call your parents, even if you haven't seen them in person at all for at least a month. Call them, hear their voices, demand they send you pictures, FaceTime them if you can. Make sure they're still alive. Make sure that the person you think you're talking to is actually there. Don't assume like I did. I spent 6 months of my life assuming that my best friend was still alive. 6 months, and all this time I was talking to her murderer. The text I sent was this. I said, "I know Madison was murdered. Who the hell are you and why are you doing this?" And they just sent me a smile. And they said, "So I take it that means no park tonight?"